皆さん、ジャパンルネッサンスにようこそ。本チャンネルは日本文化再興を目的とした放送番組です。アメリカのホームレス問題は深刻で、多くの人々が路上生活を余儀なくされている。2023年には全米で約65万人のホームレスが確認され、その数は増加傾向にある。特にカリフォルニア州はホームレスの数が多く、全体の3割を占めている。ホームレスになる原因は貧困、薬物依存、精神疾患、そして住宅不足など、さまざまな要因が複雑に絡んでいる。尊敬できるアメリカ人とは、金と地位だけが人生の成功の証。こんな文明に将来はない。米国は求める人生観において失敗した国である。個人主義、唯物主義、合理主義、プラグマティズム、産業主義、金融主義、覇権主義、軍国主義、その他すべてのイデオロギーが人生の真の価値観として意味をなさない破綻した国なのだ。まさに今だけ金だけ自分だけの愚かな価値観では、その破綻はすぐそこにある。それは国家の瓦解である。ではここで興味ある米国の SNS の記事があるのでご紹介したい。
Wakes up each morning not to the hum of a retirement home or the cold silence of an empty house in Michigan, but to the sound of roosters crowing, children laughing in 2 languages, and neighbors offering ripe mangoes over a bamboo fence. Sounds like fiction, doesn't it? But the truth is, Harold isn't alone. He's one of thousands, yes, thousands of retired American educators who are quietly, almost secretly, choosing the Philippines as the final chapter of their lives. They're not just visiting, they're settling, building homes, starting second lives. Some even say they're finally living. The first time I heard about this trend, I thought it was a mistake, a data error. After all, why would Americans, especially school teachers, many of whom barely earn enough for a comfortable life in the States, choose to move halfway across the world? Why the Philippines, a country that's often painted in foreign news with images of typhoons, traffic, and poverty? Then I met Harold, and everything changed. He was sitting under a tree in a quiet barangay outside Dumaguete, wearing a faded World's Best Teacher t-shirt. His Tagalog was terrible, his Ilonggo even worse. But when the local kids ran up to him yelling, "Tito Harold," you could see it in his eyes. He was home. Back in Michigan, he told me with a half smile, I felt like I disappeared the day I retired. Here, they still ask me to teach them. Even if it's just how to fix a leaky faucet or how clouds are formed, they still see me. It wasn't what he said that hit me. It was how he said it, like someone who had been underwater for too long and finally took a deep breath of air. Harold came to the Philippines almost by accident. His pension couldn't stretch in America. His daughter had moved to New York and barely called. He spent 2 years eating frozen dinners and listening to old jazz records in a small, rented apartment. One night, he found a YouTube video of a fellow retired teacher living in Cebu. A week later, he booked a one-way ticket. He thought it would just be a vacation. That was 6 years ago. Now he lives in a modest house with a flowering garden, pays a local woman to help with laundry, and spends his afternoons tutoring kids who come over after school. He doesn't make much, but for the first time in years, he doesn't feel poor. In fact, he feels rich. Rich in time. Rich in purpose. Rich in the way the sunlight filters through banana leaves and how the children giggle when he mispronounces their names. And Harold is far from unique. In pockets across the Philippines, from the beaches of Palawan to the hills of Tagaytay, retired American teachers are quietly planting roots. Some live in gated subdivisions, others in rural barangays. Some come for the affordability, others for the culture. But nearly all stay for something they didn't expect to find: dignity. You see, in America, the word retired often carries a shadow. It means forgotten. It means sidelined. It means, thank you for your service. Now please fade quietly. But here, age isn't a burden. It's a badge. Elders are called Tito and Tita with affection. A white-haired teacher isn't pitied. He's respected. I asked Harold once if he missed home. He paused for a moment, then looked around at the kids sitting cross-legged on the ground, waiting for him to explain how rainbows worked. "This is home," he said simply. But the story doesn't end with Harold. In fact, it barely begins there. Because for every Harold, there are dozens more, each with their own story of heartbreak, reinvention, and unexpected belonging in this archipelago of warmth and contradiction. Some came after divorce, others after cancer. A few came just to escape the cold. But all of them stayed for reasons far deeper than climate. There's Diane, a former music teacher from Ohio, who now leads a choir in Baguio. There's Joe, a retired history teacher from Texas, who married a Filipina nurse and now teaches local tour guides how to speak better English. And there's Linda, whose story, truth be told, will break your heart before it heals it. They all came here thinking they were running away from something. Instead, they found they were running towards something they never knew they needed. So, what's really happening here? Why are so many Americans, especially educators, leaving behind everything they've known to live in a place most of their friends can't even point to on a map? Is it the cost of living? The beaches? The promise of a simpler life? Or is it something deeper? Something spiritual? The answer, as we'll see, isn't simple, because what's drawing them here isn't just geography. It's the way a stranger offers them a seat on a jeepney. The way children shout, "Good morning, sir," like they're meeting royalty. The way a local family brings them soup when they're sick, even if they barely know them. It's something in the Filipino soul that whispers to the world's weary, "You still matter here." And for people like Harold, Diane, and Linda, that whisper has become a lifeline. In the next part of this journey, we'll follow Linda, once a tenured educator, now a widow, who came to the Philippines with a suitcase full of grief and a single prayer: that somewhere far away, she might find herself again. What she found was something far more powerful. Shall we continue? Linda hadn't planned on living past 65. Back in Minnesota, after 30 years of teaching literature to high schoolers and watching her husband, Paul, slowly fade from cancer, retirement didn't feel like a reward. It felt like exile. Her house was quiet. Her children had their own busy lives. The walls echoed with a silence that stretched from morning coffee to restless midnight tears. When Paul passed away, he left behind a note taped to the fridge. Linda had found it while reaching for milk. It said, "Don't disappear, Lynn. The world still needs you." At the time, she didn't understand what he meant. How could the world need a tired, grieving woman whose only real skill was teaching Shakespeare and managing teenagers? But grief does strange things. It rearranges your sense of direction. And one night, in the middle of February, with snow falling silently outside, Linda saw a comment on a Facebook post. A retired teacher living in Iloilo, sipping buko juice and smiling like he had found the fountain of youth. She clicked, then clicked again. By the end of the week, she had booked a flight. Linda didn't expect much. A few weeks away, maybe some sunshine, a chance to breathe. What she didn't expect was a country that wrapped around her like a warm blanket. Strangers greeted her with smiles. A family in her Airbnb invited her for dinner her first night. And when she walked past a local school and peeked in, the principal, upon learning she was a former teacher, asked if she'd be willing to volunteer. She didn't even have time to say no. That was 3 years ago. Today, Linda lives in a rented bungalow just outside Iloilo City. It's not fancy. The electricity sometimes flickers during storms. Her internet isn't always reliable. But she swears her heart beats differently here. Steadier, calmer, happier. She teaches 3 days a week now. Not for money, but for joy. She helps students with English, sometimes literature, sometimes even life advice. They call her Ma'am Linda, and some of them hug her before class starts. "I feel like I matter again," she told me, tears in her eyes. "Like I've stepped into the pages of a story I didn't know I was still writing." Her pension, once barely enough to cover rent and healthcare in the US, goes a long way here. She can afford fresh food, medication, and even an occasional trip to Guimaras to see the mango trees. But that's not what keeps her here. It's the people. The tricycle driver who waits outside her home, just in case she needs a ride. The sari-sari store owner who taught her how to cook adobo. The church choir that invited her to sing, even though she can't hit the high notes anymore. They didn't ask for her resume. They didn't care about her degrees. They saw her. The human, the heart, the soul. And Linda, slowly but surely, began to come back to life. "I don't think I was just grieving Paul," she said once. "I think I was grieving who I used to be. And somehow, this country reminded me." There's a quiet revolution happening across the Philippines, one that rarely makes headlines but echoes in every barangay where someone like Linda, Harold or Joe has put down roots. It's not about colonization or charity or escape. It's about healing. Many of these retirees don't just come for the sunshine. They come with invisible wounds, from years of overwork, from loneliness, from feeling like their usefulness ended the day they turned in their keys at the school office. And the Philippines, in its own unassuming, generous way, offers them not just a place, but a purpose. You see it in the way they light up when telling stories of their students, in the way they've adopted local dogs, joined barangay cleanup drives, and learned to laugh at their own mispronunciations. There's a humility in starting over, and there's something deeply human in being welcomed anyway. Not all stories are rosy, of course. Some struggle with visas, with language, with the inevitable cultural misunderstandings. But even those rough edges seem to soften over time, smoothed by the kindness of neighbors, the rhythm of island life, and the simple act of being needed again. Diane once said it best, sitting on a bench in Baguio, surrounded by her choir of teenagers. In America, they called me retired. Here they call me teacher. It's just one word, but it makes all the difference. What if the world measured success not by money or titles, but by the lives we still touch, even when we're no longer on payroll? What if aging wasn't a slow descent, but a second climb, toward wisdom and laughter and late-blooming joy? These stories might seem small. One old woman singing in a choir, one old man explaining cloud formation to barefoot kids. But they speak to something bigger, a hunger in the human heart to be seen, to be loved, to be useful. And maybe, just maybe, the Philippines is answering that hunger in ways the modern West has forgotten. But what happens when this quiet movement begins to grow? In Part 3, we'll step into the story of Joe, a Vietnam veteran and former high school history teacher from Texas, who swore he'd never leave American soil. Until one stormy night in Cebu, when a knock on his door changed everything. And what came next? Well, let's just say, even Joe didn't see it coming. Joe was never the kind of man who cried. He came from the old school, Texas-born, Army-raised, Vietnam-tested, a history teacher with calloused hands and a voice like gravel. In his small town outside El Paso, students respected him, but they also feared him a little. He taught like a soldier, clear, firm, no nonsense. But under all that, there was a tenderness he didn't know how to show, not until he lost his wife, Maria. They were married for 42 years. She was a nurse, and the only one who could soften the hard edges of Joe's personality. When cancer took her, he didn't tell anyone how it broke him. Not his children, not his colleagues. He just kept going, until one day, he stopped. Retirement came like a blow, not a blessing. He found himself waking up at 5 a.m. like always, but with nowhere to go. No students to challenge him, no Mariah to make coffee. The house felt like a tomb. One night, he was scrolling through YouTube when he stumbled on a video titled, "Why I Left America to Teach in the Philippines." He almost skipped it, thought it was just another clickbait vlog. But the man in the thumbnail looked like him. Gray hair, wrinkled eyes, something weary behind the smile. He clicked. It was a simple video. An ex-military teacher living in Cebu, talking about how he'd found meaning again, teaching kids English and history in a small private school. The man talked about respect, how in the Philippines, people still stood when elders entered a room, how children would bow their heads and touch his hand to their forehead, saying, "Mano po," how it reminded him of a time when teachers were honored, not forgotten. Joe sat there in the dark, something stirring in him that hadn't moved in years. 2 months later, he landed in Mactan, with nothing but a suitcase and his wife's photo in his wallet. He didn't know a soul. He had no plan. But from the moment he stepped off the plane, things began to shift. A taxi driver helped him find a temporary apartment. The landlady brought him pancit on his first night. Within a week, he was asked to guest teach at a local school whose principal overheard him speaking at a cafe. "I just wanted to explain who Abraham Lincoln really was," Joe chuckled. "Next thing I know, I'm in a classroom again." He stayed for the children, stayed for the way they listened. Not just with their ears, but with their eyes, their hearts. One boy, Carlo, reminded him of his youngest son. Every day after class, Carlo would stay behind and ask questions, not just about American presidents, but about Joe himself. "Why did you come here, sir?" Joe never had a good answer. But one night, during a storm, the power went out mid-lesson. The students pulled out candles. Someone brought bread. And they kept talking about history, about life, about the pain of losing someone you love. Carlo listened quietly, then said something Joe never forgot. "You didn't come here to teach us. You came here to find yourself." And maybe he was right, because Joe, like Linda and Harold before him, began to smile again. Not the forced smile for family photos, but the kind that sneaks up on you when you forget to guard your heart. He joined the barangay's veterans group, taught first aid on weekends, even learned to ride a motorbike, very slowly and very badly. But no one laughed at him. They cheered. Because in the Philippines, age isn't a weakness. It's a story, a legacy, a lamp lighting the way for those still growing. "I used to think America was the best country in the world," Joe told me once. "And don't get me wrong, I still love my country, but America forgot how to love people like me back." That sentence stuck with me, because it wasn't just about money or politics, it was about belonging, about a sense of usefulness that transcends titles and age. And that's what so many of these retired teachers are quietly discovering here: a second wind, a second chance, a second home. None of them came for paradise. They came because they had nowhere else to go. But what they found was a nation that said, "Tito, ma'am, sir, stay. You still have something to give." Now Joe walks through the market, and everyone greets him by name. He gives away history books to sari-sari stores. And on Sundays, he stands at the back of the local church, eyes misty as the choir sings Amazing Grace, the same song played at Maria's funeral. "I think she would have liked it here," he says. And I believe she would have. The Philippines didn't erase Joe's grief, but it gave him space to carry it with dignity. And in that quiet space, something remarkable happened. He came back to life. As our story nears its final part, a bigger question begins to emerge. If so many American educators are moving to the Philippines for their golden years, what does that say about the countries they left behind? And more importantly, what does it say about the soul of the Philippines? In our final chapter, we'll connect the dots: how a culture of family, faith, and simple respect has created a silent magnet for the world's forgotten teachers, and how, perhaps without even trying, the Philippines is teaching the world a lesson it desperately needs to learn. Stay with me. The heart of this story is just about to unfold. There's a small cafe in Dumaguete, tucked between a sari-sari store and a dusty barbershop, where every Wednesday at 3 p.m., 5 retired American teachers gather like clockwork. They sit at a table under the fan, drink lukewarm coffee, and talk about everything from 1960s classroom discipline to the latest typhoon warnings. They laugh easily. They speak in a mix of English and broken Visayan. And if you listen closely, you might hear it, the unspoken truth humming beneath their conversations. They were not meant to end this way. In another timeline, these men and women would have faded into nursing homes, bankrupted by medical bills, maybe remembered once a year by grandchildren too busy to call. Their wisdom would have gone dusty in suburban homes, their talents filed away with their old diplomas. But instead, they're here, living, teaching, laughing, healing. And this isn't some retirement fantasy cooked up by a tourism board. It's a quiet reality unfolding every day across the archipelago, built not on luxury, but on meaning. Not on beach resorts or tax loopholes, but on one thing most of the developed world has forgotten: human connection. Ask them why they stayed, and you'll hear different answers. The warmth of the people, the slower pace, the way neighbors treat you like family, even if you barely speak the language. But listen deeper, and you'll hear something more profound. It's the dignity. It's being called sir or ma'am, without a trace of irony. It's being asked to help, not because you're strong or young, but because you're trusted. It's the shock of realizing that your life still has purpose, even when you thought it was behind you. And yes, the cost of living plays a role. A modest pension stretches further here. $1,000 a month might buy you anxiety in Los Angeles, but here it buys groceries, medicine, companionship, and a quiet life with a view of the sea. It buys you the one thing money rarely can back home: peace. But the deeper current is cultural, it's spiritual, it's Filipino, because in the Philippines, the elderly are not burdens. They are beacons. The teacher is not obsolete, he is sacred. And the outsider, if he comes with humility, is not rejected, he is embraced. That's what makes this phenomenon so quietly radical. While the West debates how to treat its aging population, the Philippines has simply remembered. It has remembered how to honor those who gave their lives to others, how to listen to stories from before smartphones, how to say salamat po with genuine warmth, not corporate politeness. It's not perfect. No place is. There are challenges here too: bureaucracy, blackouts, occasional homesickness. But somehow, those rough edges are softened by the little things. The bowl of arroz caldo a neighbor brings you when you're sick. The street kids who shout, "Good morning, teacher," like it's a prayer. The sense that, no matter how foreign you are, this land is willing to make space for your heart. And maybe that's why the movement is still so quiet. Because those who find it don't want to lose it. They don't write books or make the news. They just live. Day by day. Lesson by lesson. Smile by unexpected smile. And in doing so, they become part of something bigger than themselves. It's not just about Americans finding refuge. It's about a country, our country, offering something the world desperately needs. A model of how to treat those who came before us. A way to live where the value of a person doesn't expire with age. Where teachers, caregivers, elders are still seen as fountains, not fossils. What would happen if more countries learned from the Philippines? What if we all remembered that dignity isn't something you earn? It's something you preserve? Maybe that's the real story here, not just of teachers retiring abroad, but of a nation reminding the world how to care. As Joe once told me, standing at the edge of a rice field as the sun dipped low, "Back home, I was an old man. Here, I'm a teacher again, and that makes all the difference." So the next time someone asks why thousands of American educators are quietly moving to the Philippines, don't say it's just about cost. Tell them it's about dignity. It's about grace. It's about a country that still sees the value in a chalk-stained hand and a life filled with lessons. And maybe, just maybe, it's about a little island nation teaching the world one final beautiful lesson.
タイ、フィリピンなどの東南アジアの国々は決して豊かな国ではない。しかし、米国ではもう失われている深い人間の絆、すなわち家族とそれを守るコミュニティが依然として残っている。しかしこうしたものはもうニューヨークには残っていないだろう。米国は豊かな国ではあるが、国民を守ってくれる社会がない。唯物主義、プラグマティズムの中から真の文化は生まれない。文化は心の触れ合いの中から生まれるものだ。文化は歴史と伝統のあるところに生き続ける。文化は心の触れ合いの場から生まれるものだ。日々の生活の触れ合いの中で文化は醸成されていく。ニューヨークにはそうしたものはない。作られた劇場ビジネスでは本物の文化は育たない。ハリウッドも同じである。米国は今も我々の先生だと勘違いしている京大出身の石破君の、いや、日本に未来はない。それではまたさようなら。チャンネル登録よろしくお願いします。